Okay, let's call the meeting to order.
Jan as the chairperson for the meeting tonight.
I'll second that.
All right, for roll call, we have 4 of the members here, absentee 2. Approval of the minutes. Anybody have any additions or corrections? If not, I entertain a motion to approve.
I so move.
Second.
All say I do.
I do.
I do.
Approve. Into old business, the city council workshop meeting. John, can you tell us when and where and what we're doing?
I have been in contact with staff. I did ask that we push it back from the May 14th workshop meeting to June. So right now it's tentatively set for June 11th is the next city workshop meeting. Don't know if we'll be entirely ready by the June, but if not June, then certainly by July. I do have the bulk of the PowerPoint presentation ready to go for that. I was hoping to go through it a little bit tonight, but I honestly mistakenly forgot to bring it. But essentially, the PowerPoint presentation introduces the commission. It highlights our strategic goals and really just captures a lot of the stuff that we've already been doing over the last few months. It has sections from the newsletter article. It has sections from the brochure that was put online and things like that. And then it also has a educational component of what we intend to educate our residents about as far as ravine maintenance and what their responsibilities are and things like that. So that's where it's currently at, and I've been adding the pictures that I've gotten from the other commissioners that have sent them to me. I know Hart had sent me some pictures, and Kathy had sent me some pictures and some things like that. And if any of you other commissioners have some pictures that you feel would be nice to include in that PowerPoint presentation, I'll still take those and work those in as well.
Are there any other pictures that you would need, or a variety, something that may be in addition to what you have?
With the pictures that I have currently, a lot of them are flooding events previous. I will say some of them are black and white pictures, so they go back, I think your pictures, Hart, a lot of them are from correct me if I'm wrong, but from the 80s.
Yes.
And so certainly I can tell by the dress style and the vehicles that they're 1980s pictures. So certainly that shows, kind of where we've come from. I don't have a lot of more recent flooding pictures. And whether it's localized flooding in front yards and in ditches or even creek, high water creek levels. So I don't have a lot of those pictures of more recent flooding. Certainly we have some pictures of the new River Trails Park District, the stabilization efforts that they've made just south of Edwards. We have some kind of pictures of that. I think showing the ideal state of the McDonald Creek, and it would be nice to highlight kind of what the reality is for the rest of the creek. And I have worked in sections of the Lower Des Plaines River watershed plan into that PowerPoint presentation, captured some of the data from that. I think the thing that jumped out at me going through that watershed plan more than anything else was the population that is in the McDonald Creek area. It's about 10 square miles of drainage district, but it has just short of 650,000 people that are served by McDonald Creek. I think that's a number that is worth highlighting. The fact that we have, am I right on that, Mark? Or does that number seem pretty high? I mean, when I was thinking about it on the way here, it seems pretty high, but I did see that in that report, and it does project a 5% growth, and so they had both a 2,000 population and a 2030 projected population.
I don't remember seeing the numbers. It does seem a little high based on, we're 16,000 people.
Right.
Wheeling is maybe 50, and Buffalo Road, Arlington Heights have different things, and they have not just McDonald Creek, but there's also the Buffalo Creek that takes up a lot of the residents. So
Yeah.
sounds
Okay, I'll have to double look at that number. I know that some of those communities have much higher population densities than we do, but that number did seem pretty significant. But either way, I think what it highlights is that there is a significant population served by the McDonald Creek drainage system. So it's working in some of those statistics from the report as well, basically.
Yeah, I kind of go along with it, because if you look at the start of McDonald Creek, which basically is 53 and Lake Cook Road, and start working your way down with all its tributaries, picking up the density of population, that may be fairly correct.
So that's the current status of the preparations being made for the city council workshop meeting. At some point, we probably should have a conversation about what that looks like, meaning that I'm assuming that certainly I'm willing to do the presentation, but I'm assuming the rest of the commission members would want to come to the city council workshop with me. And so, I don't know if that June 11th date works for everybody that's here, or if somebody's got a conflict and we want to push it back to July, or what we want to do on that.
I think that's a Monday, isn't it, June
Yeah.
11th?
Usually.
Yes, it's usually a June, and I will say that the staff asked that I provide them the materials a week in advance so that they can send it out to the city council in advance with their packet. So that would mean I need to have it all ready to go basically by June 4th.
And what time would that be on that Monday?
6:30.
So Rick, did you have some pictures you were sharing with John? Was that for the presentation or only for July the 2nd?
No, that's for June 2nd.
June 2nd, okay. Because Rick does have some other pictures too you
Okay.
might be able to use. Okay, the progress on the brochure distribution. How are we doing?
Well, I've been with my neighbors on both sides, and I've dropped a couple off down the line, not having talked to anybody. And this is where, when you drop this off, if we're not going to be able to, knock on the door and actually talk to the homeowner, sometimes rather than just dropping off the brochure, is to have a little letter that goes with it. And sometimes that, depending on where you're at along the creek, like in my case, it's all on one side, the other people live on it, but we own both sides of the tributary. So it just seems like having a letter from your neighbor explaining sometimes works better, and with maybe a reference to, access the website and look at the information there might work a little bit better.
Right.
Excuse me, I still wonder how we're going to take care of everybody on the creek to give that distribution. And I volunteered to take, the Ward 2, all those people there, as I've talked to before. But I'm wondering, how do we develop a plan for the distribution along the rest of the city who live along the creek?
I
Because
think
that's big.
we had that spreadsheet that Kathy had prepared, and honestly, I think the number of residents directly along the creek is not as high of a number as I think that we imagined it to be. I think you're talking about 100, if I remember correctly. So, and we had kind of broken up the section of the city into sections, and we were going to each do a section. So I think
see.
that's kind of where it's still at.
Okay.
Now, I have a question, Mark. What do you think, as far as, we have the addresses of all the homes along the creek. Do you think we would be more effective if we were to mail something to all those residents? Where they would get something in the mail, like with the brochure and maybe a cover letter, and actually put it in the mail with them, then something that maybe, okay, call this person or that person.
My personal view, if you're asking, is something delivered in the mail to them with an information sheet explaining in detail about what you're talking about is a much better way than even if you put something on, like, hung out the door,
Right.
it's not from the city, then it's just somebody dropping something off. I've seen people walk in the neighborhoods and stuff in the mailboxes. Not supposed to do it, but it doesn't, it's not quite the same. Being a commission, if you guys had something and you needed to send out to 110 residents, I don't think postage is an issue. And getting the envelopes and help you guys get that into their mailbox. But I would agree that mailing is probably the most accurate way.
So that we don't have to
I do
compete with
too.
Comcast and the pizza delivery service, is what you're saying. So we don't have to compete with Comcast and the delivery service who's always leaving stuff on our doors.
I think that's a good idea. I also think a cover letter could also come from the commission with maybe a star for the person that lives closest to for contact. So where you're living can make a difference as well for contact.
Well, we could, if we're gonna do a mailing, we could take those addresses and then basically break them up into wards and have a contact person, which would be different for each section, depending on where
Yeah,
we're
it's a
at.
good idea.
Because you do direct through quite a few ones. The way it comes through.
Right. Okay, then I guess my next question, when you do something like that, would each envelope have to be individually typed with the address? I don't know how that works with the city as far as a mailing goes.
We could do a workshop night. Take about 2 hours, and the whole commission comes, and we have all our stuff, we have the list of names. You take so many, you take so many, and we can get it done in an hour and a half.
We have 110, so 25 apiece. It wouldn't be so bad.
Okay.
Automated would be great, to type it in, print it on labels, and stick them on the envelope. I don't know what type of software upstairs that they use on that, but I don't know if they can segregate it down to just people that live on the creek. There's different
Mailing lists that they have.
mailing lists for water people, sewer people, and stuff like that, but you might be on the.
That would be
right
good
track.
for future too, if they could sort it by that, because there may be other mailings that would be happening in the future we need to give to them.
But
So if
as
they-
hard as you explained, my thought would be is if you knew that we have 20 or so homes that are in this ward, and I'm the closest guy, maybe you have 3 or 4 different letters, and you have 20 copies of this, 20 copies of this. So you're not sending the same cover letter to every person, you're putting in your information and the alderman's information on there for these 20 people. Might be a good way to go. That way they're getting it more specific, if you want to get them to the right alderman.
And now that we're talking, it raises another thought, which is dangerous. But as your role for Public Works, if we had this list, like you say, they have mailing lists, a special list that incorporated all the addresses of people along the creek. If we had that as part of the city database,
Right.
and Public Works needed to get, or even the resource committee, we could go to that mailing list, and even your department, okay, we want information sent out to just the homeowners along the creek.
So it may be a good thing to compile and keep on file, is what you're saying.
Yes,
Instead of just
I
handwriting
agree.
it the first time, because down the road, the commission might come up with something else and you mailed out in 6 months, and now all of a sudden you're writing out another 110 letters.
Yeah, and like I said, it would not only serve our purposes, but could also be an aid to you.
I can talk to staff about that tomorrow and see if, who upstairs would be able to put that together. I'm not
Yeah, no,
I'm the nuts and bolts guy, I'm not as much the computer, but, sure.
Do you think they would supply us with Prospect Heights logo
Yes.
for envelopes and pay the postage?
And I don't know that we want to put the alderman necessarily. My assumption, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, would be that we'd probably put the local commission member, whoever's in their neighborhood, and then direct them to Mark. I don't know that if we're gonna do the alderman, then we would have to at least talk to them, tell them what we're doing, give them a copy of the letter in advance so that they could approve it. So I think it's probably simpler if we keep it to staff and the commission. And if they have an issue that we can't resolve, or they feel that it hasn't been resolved, they can go, to the next step.
My vision on that is if we had the database and they could just, it would be resident and your address, and they could print out the 110 envelopes.
Or, well, they print out labels.
Right.
Yeah, 5 sheets of pre-populated labels, just put on the envelope.
Okay, and then we would just get it, and then we could put it and then add on our little workshop whatever we wanted to put inside the envelopes.
That type of database would benefit going forward.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
And if we visit, we could even have names applied to those addresses eventually.
Right.
Which I have on some of mine.
which is good and bad, though, you'll have some people that do move.
Right.
And they
Yes.
see mail coming in for another person, they think it's a bill, so they throw it away.
Well, that's true.
So
If we're active, we might know that,
we've had that with
but I hear
water and
you.
sewer issues.
But yes, if that would work, I think that would work very well if we could do that.
To our friends on the creek. Or whatever happens.
Right.
Okay, very good. Moving along to new business.
If I can have one more thing, sorry.
Mhm.
Commissioner Fuller. The letter that you guys are gonna put together and send out to residents, it probably should be viewed by someone, the city administrator or myself, just to confirm that the message sounds
Yeah.
clear and
Correct.
concise.
Right.
Just a thought.
Okay,
No, that should be.
Yeah,
I
we'll
agree.
probably take it through Peter. Ultimately, I'm sure he's the one that'll do the mail merge and help us with the postage and all that, so if you're included in it, then we'll let you make sure that you are providing the right contact information that you want.
So backing up to that same thing, do we now plan ahead to get it done? And when? Do we have
Well,
it?
I would hope between now and the next meeting, we could each individually maybe put together
A
a
letter?
letter of what we would like to say, and we can either email it for everybody's review and discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay. The cover letter, and the other pieces in the mailing would be the brochure.
This way we'll have
Sure.
everybody's different idea of what it is they'd like to say to their neighbor.
And we will be seeing people with the presentation if it happens on June the 11th, that we could so approve. And then we're going to see people on June the 2nd, some of us, for Community Day booths. So we might be able to coordinate a letter to be done by one of those 2 dates, and then just get together and have one of those workshops that goes, which are kind of fun if we all get together when you do mailings. All right, moving along. New business. So, Public Works response to the issues on Camp McDonald Road Bridge. So that's for you, Mark. Would you like to speak to us?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Mark Roscoe, Superintendent of Public Works. A couple weeks ago, I met with MWRD out on Camp McDonald Road, and I came up with a response from them, and I put together a little couple paragraph report. I'd like to read it to you guys because our visitors and our listeners at home don't know what was in the letter that we've been talking about.
There you
So,
go.
I'd like to, it was sent out Wednesday, May 9th. The Creek Commission, I had a meeting with the MWRD regarding flow, level, erosion, bank stabilization, bridge work, and debris on 5/8/2018. The intent of my meeting was primarily to discuss our end of the creek from Camp McDonald Road to the Mount Prospect Park. We looked at locations in this area and talked through ownership and responsibility. The MWRD Maintenance Division will only address issues that block flow or cause structure loss. They do not typically address silt buildup because the creek will meander around a bit and it's not in a concrete channel. Residents that live on the creek are expected to maintain their property. The MWRD will assist in clearing large trees that fall into the water and will in some cases haul away the large pieces. But it is the homeowner's land and they are truly responsible. In regards to 905, 907 Camp McDonald Road area, they reviewed the stabilization that was done over 20 years ago at 905 Camp McDonald Road and 907 when the bridge was replaced. That is the bridge on Camp McDonald Road. The block work is in good condition for its age and is still doing what it's designed for. The lean of the residents' added block gardening wall and stones are due to the weight of the earth above them and as gravity pulls them towards the river. As the property is in a floodplain and when the creek is at a high level, this area of the property is saturated. It is not uncommon for garden-style retaining walls to lean after years of weather. There is silt built up on the east shore at 907 Camp McDonald Road, and that property owner can clear and remove it if they choose to do so. The invasion of trees into the block stabilization will weaken it over the years. The homeowner has not maintained their property. Again, that is on the east shore. The MWRD will clear a small area on the right-of-way from the bridge to the storm inlet, which is approximately 10 feet in from the roadway. And they're going to do that, aside from what's on here, they're going to do that for their own maintenance reasons. So they have access to get in and out of the creek if needed. They're going to do that on both sides of the bridge, actually. I will contact the highway department, the county highway department, and put a request in for silt removal below the bridge. Due to the fact that the bridge opening is so wide, this may or may not be viewed as a project for them at this time. Regarding a large-scale creek plan for stabilization, a comprehensive plan would need to be developed, reviewed by the Army Corps, the IEPA, and the Des Plaines Watershed Committee. It could then be submitted for review to be added to the Des Plaines River Watershed Plan. The City of Prospect Heights would then be asked what their contribution amount would be. The project would need to meet certain parameters to be considered. Not just the benefit to the improved area, but to the entire creek. These plans take time to get to a presentable stage. Along with this report, I put in a link to the MWRD's website, which has a detailed listing of the watershed plan that was completed February 28th of 2011. And there's actually quite a bit more information on there that I played around and didn't realize all that was out there. The ending of the report says the NWRD will be pulling a large tree out of the creek in the next week, weather permitting, near Almond Ridge. Thank you, Mark. So the tree that they're pulling out is a willow, corner of someone's property. Their plan was to go in there, cut it up, get it up onto the shore, and then that resident would have to dispose of it unless they could create an easy path for them to get it out to the street. I don't know what the end result was on that. I know MWRD was out there, and pretty much at that point, we left them with, if they need assistance from the city with any of it, or the resident does, let me know. There hasn't been any contact since then. In our review of the flooding and everything that's gone on in the last week, there wasn't a blockage there, so we didn't go into that lady's backyard. Regarding the other parts of the letter, the MWRD regarding erosion control, they stress the fact that the residents that live along the creek need to be concerned about their own erosion control. The creek has been dredged in certain spots over the years. Looking back at some of the reports, I've seen a couple little things that have been done, but in the large scale, where it goes through town, there hasn't been any major event that's happened. The majority of everything that I've seen that's happened with the creek over the years was at locations where there's crossings, bridge work. 907, 905, they did that work because of the bridge. The bank stabilization project was done right there, and that's where they ended. They went a certain distance out on either side, and that was it. In the Mount Prospect area, they did quite a long stretch. There was a $1.5 million project. I think Mount Prospect Park District put in around $400,000 is my recollection of what I was reading. So they had a big stake in the game over there to do what they've done. And they got a grant for a big portion of it. So it took them a long time to get to that point. I believe it's an asset to have property that's on the creek. I really do. But at the same time, it hurts you too when you get the water. Let's see what else I had in here. I went to the MWRD's meeting for this month. They had down in North Lake, and one of the projects they discussed was the bridge improvement plan, the rebuilding of Willow Road by Owen Court and Hillcrest. It's raising Willow Road between the two ponds, or between the slough and the lake, as it's officially called. It's still on their board, still a plan to get it done. It's not moving very fast, but it's still being talked about. Joe Wade, our city administrator, has been involved with all the legalities of getting that to work through. So he's the best answer for detailed questions, but I can tell you that it's still on the radar, and it still was posted up on the big board as a project that needs to be done. So that's good for us. What else? Questions? What else can I?
I would like to give up my chair role right now, as I'm one of the residents that actually initiated this with Mark. So somebody else, while this discussion goes on, wants to chair, go for it.
Well, you can be a dual.
Right.
Well, officially, that old parliamentary procedure thing, you know how that goes. Anyway, and I would just like to say I thank Mark for answering my call and coming over to look at everything, and then setting up that meeting with MWRD, and I was able to meet with him as well. Not during the whole time while you guys did your work, but. And after going through this, and Mark read it to me before he sent it out to everybody, because he didn't want me to be too upset of what I read, which was nice of you. And anyway, I still have a few little questions I just would like to ask. I'll go the last thing first. Now that the leaves have come up just within the last few days, if you would kind of come and take a look from the bridge and see now on that 907, how now all of that tree stuff is now going into the creek. And I do remember years ago, when the other creek committee existed, that we were able to get the city, and you might remember who, to give citations to the owners who did not keep their responsibility up in clearing that creek. I don't know at this time, this is pretty bad, and of course we know that that property was rented and the owner is in Arizona. But I would suspect in that circumstance there needs to be a contact made to that person knowing that responsibility, because it is directing the water onto my neighbor's property as well as mine at the end, and it is their responsibility. I'm not sure who it was who initiated that letter. Do you remember her?
No.
But there were citations in some cases that were given, whether they were ever followed up and got any money for it. I remember the letter. And I didn't get one, but I know that the property on Camp McDonald Road, that's the third house down, did. And
Well, you bring up a good question to add, or information to add if we do this letter. When you're talking about the homeowner that basically is part of the creek or owns the creek, both sides, halfway, whatever it is, listing their responsibility by in letting them know, look, we're not just asking you to do us a favor as a city. This is your responsibility as a homeowner, and
Your property.
your property. And we don't want anybody to get into trouble with citations and the rest of it. So it's basically, hey guy, here's the information, you do with it what you need to do before we start
yeah, giving them citations.
giving them
And
citations.
that, of course, came with our box and so on, so
And
they
I
were
think,
well aware.
you know, we as a city, I think, have been kind of laxed in providing that kind of information to the residents that actually live along the creek.
The indication that they can get a citation.
Not only citation, but what their
Monitoring.
responsibilities are as part of their property. And I think that's part of what we as a commission are trying to do, is to
Educate.
educate the residents.
I would agree. I think that it needs to be a sense of progressive discipline. A person needs to understand what their responsibilities are before they can be held accountable for that. I would imagine if there were assumptions now, I would imagine if there were violations written in the past, it was an obvious impediment to the creek that a person either had intentionally done or at least knowingly let continue to be there.
And the creek was well monitored then, because it was a once-a-month meeting with designated people from the whole area of the city. So at that point, we knew what was happening all the way along. And it's not something that was, and then a cooperation would go like to your department. And so it was a continual thing, but nothing really has been done since 2004.
Are you saying you want us to be water cops?
Yeah,
basically?
I've got the boots still, if you want to put them on, I think they'll fit you.
I think aside from that
That's
part of
what
it is, I think you hit it, the word earlier, is education.
Right.
Getting the information out to the residents so they understand what they need to do and what their responsibilities are. I think the ordinance or a violation part of it is something that would be, one, staff would have to look at the legalities and what actually fits our city ordinances and what the steps are.
Right.
Correct.
Before we talk about that, even though we are in public now, we're on TV, but that's something that there's a progressive part to that.
Right.
Yes.
But through the legal channels, I think a big portion of it is the education, and with education, a lot of times compliance goes hand in hand.
Yes, and for example, I've talked to my neighbor a couple of times about, you own the creek, you need to maintain that, and to emphasize that, look, if you cut it and you got less than 4-foot bundle that somebody can lift, you put it out with the garbage and it'll go away. It's not that big a deal. When we had a tree fall, MWRD came in, hired a contractor, he took the tree down, and they took it, they ground it, and they took it all away. So it wasn't even left on their property. But the basic stuff that we're looking for, a lot of it can be disposed if people are informed that's what you need to do.
Right.
Right.
And I think as you guys talked about earlier, months back, about a creek cleanup day, maybe that can be sectioned to a little bit more addressable. Break the creek up into certain areas based on the geography, like where your situation is. Everyone along that north-south section, between Thursday and Sunday of this week, if you have trees that you chop down, drag them to the roadside, and then Monday, Public Works will come by with a chipper and dredge them all up. On the Public Works side of it, when we do that, we're going to be popping our head into the backyard to make sure someone didn't take down one of their other trees, that we're just taking creek trees.
Right.
Because we don't want to get into the situation where we're offering a free chipper service to 3/4 acre lots.
And I think what would be helpful to this committee is areas of concern that you have, in your jurisdiction. If we're going to do that you would say, okay, here's where I need you to, this area should be done first, second, third, so that we can essentially work together to address the most needed areas.
I think it's all needed, Hart, or Commissioner, sorry. I think it's all needed. So I think it's more, in my mind, it would be more geography-based than need-based, because it's everywhere. As we've talked about, the Creek Commission hasn't really been in full speed. For years, it wasn't in place.
Right.
Now that you guys are getting up and getting the ball rolling and the water flowing, I think everywhere needs something. Maybe a plan of, this fall we'll address this section, in the spring we'll address this section, a few-year project, because it's a long creek, from Cornell all the way down.
Right.
We stop at Camp McDonald Road. We really don't look anything past that.
Everybody does, I know. For years, we've done that.
And my thought of it is that, you know, you always start downstream and work your way upstream.
That's
You know,
correct.
unless there is a need upstream, but, you know, you certainly don't, if there's blockages upstream and you start removing those blockages, it just moves the volume of water faster to downstream. So I think you would almost start at the Edwards or at the southern limit and work your way
So-
north, because
South of
that's
the bridge.
typically.
That's a great point, Commissioner.
Okay,
Two other questions I have, Mark. When you say that comprehensive plan will need to be reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers, how would they be? It seems pretty clear, which shocked me, and that has been a change in what my knowledge was with the change of the function of MWRD. They have now categorized and made it a little more bureaucratic as to what they can and can't do as compared to what their sharing was before in my brain.
Okay.
So when your letter did respond to say that everything is to the ownership's responsibility on the creek, I was very shocked that all of that blocking that was put in by the county that has been told it would not maintain by the agency that does all the meter reading. And when all of a sudden MWRD or Cook County Highway Department or whoever put up that bridge isn't about to take any additional responsibility for it, and now that they're saying it is the homeowner's responsibility, that means any ripping up of anything in that becomes my responsibility. At the end of it, where our two properties join, the Cook County did never extend by the contract to the end of my property, in which case the gouging there, plus the amount well, we had to pay, of course, in one of the reimbursements for landscaping. And so the tree that is actually there, that they landscaped, it's beginning to do this. Forget the wall, that was my thing. But the gouging at the end of that doesn't even go to my property line and never did. And then Rick's next to mine, his is being gouged tremendously too. And so that silt buildup that they're about to do just the 10 feet, if in fact the owners at 907 or on the other side, as you remember that wheeling silt bed that is building up big time, that needs to be removed as well. So I guess my question begins to go, what agency other than the homeowner will be responsible for the maintenance of what they did and continuing? And that led to the question that I had with you there as well as MWRD. At the time the city of Prospect Heights decided they were going to take over Camp McDonald Road, and at the time that that road was completed and the bridge built, the city decided that no, they weren't going to do that. They would let it stay by the county road, as they then did with, additionally then with the other roads that now have become county. At what point, I want to know, when that was turned over, was there any agreement at all for maintenance in cooperation with that release? And that was the question that the MWRD guy asked at the same time. I don't know what the records would show. I don't know that there were any records. It was just a sudden verbal release. But I just find it strange that when somebody puts up a huge bridge, bigger than what was necessary, but puts up a huge bridge, puts in that concrete stuff on both sides, and then proceeds then in later years to say it's the homeowner's responsibility when the erosion is bad below it. Or the meander, you see.
Okay, hang on. If you could, you've asked me about 10 questions.
All right, here's what
and
it
I
amounts
haven't
to.
had any opportunity to answer anything.
No, because I'm trying to finish. I don't want to do it anymore. I want to know what other agencies, including the city, have responsibilities for other things within that creek, beside us now saying it's only the homeowners, because there are structural things there that were not our choice.
Okay.
Who is it?
So structural things, as
Cook County built the bridge.
the bridge is a structure, the riprap is
structure?
It can be defined as stream bank stabilization. I wouldn't consider it structure, I'd consider it stream bank stabilization, just to make it easier for us to talk about different things. A home is a structure, the bridge is a structure, the stream bank stabilization was put in. The creek is not a concrete culvert that runs through there. If the bridge wasn't redone 20 years ago, we're not sure what the property would look like now along your side. We don't know where the creek would have meandered or taken away or added to. What would be different there? Whether your property or your neighbor's property would be affected differently. We know that the stabilization that they did along that section, when it ends, obviously there's a lot of erosion that's taking place. So we don't know what it would have looked like before that.
I would only answer with another comment. When the water people use the word meander, and I've gone through that because I know the attorney I had wanted to make that state right in the middle of the creek where the ownership was. I know that when a building structure changes the meandering of a creek, what responsibility is it then for continued maintenance of the structure and land south and north of it?
So far, I haven't found any contract or any type of maintenance agreement past what's been happening with the bridge. I haven't come across anything.
I know.
And I would believe that when the project was completed 20 years ago, your concern about the fact that they didn't go all the way to the end of your property at that point would have been addressed 20 years ago or the year after it was done or during that process.
There was
So
conversation.
So at this point, that's water on the bridge.
Okay, my next comment is, though, what they do need to remember was when they originally did all those plans, 907 was to be taken equally with 905 in terms of the excavation that
but
went
again-
to the court.
But again, 20 years ago, I hate to stop you on that, but at that point, it doesn't do anything for us now. I know that we've talked about where they took how much property on 905, and 907 seems to be adding on a little bit, but there's nothing that,
No, it was dropped. It
Right.
was
But at
it was
this-
eminent domain
yeah.
that was dropped at the last minute.
So-
But that doesn't matter.
And-
All
and
I
the
want to
city-
know is what is going to, not from now, I already know. What I want to know is what other agencies are responsible for the creek with its, and who you are going to continue to talk with, because MWRV is not going to do anything. And we know that. It's pretty obvious. They're only going to be doing anything that falls within the creek. If you should live in the floodplain,
if,
then, and there's damage, which I know I have had, they're not going to do anything.
the other agencies involved won't be doing maintenance on the creek. They won't be taking care of shoreline restabilization or adding anything to help the creek unless it comes through as a part of the larger scale plan through the Lower Des Plaines Watershed Committee, and it's agreed that it's a project that can be worked, that has the dollars and cents that line up, that there's enough being committed from the city and enough being committed from grants, and it's going to have a tangible dollar amount savings. If we can prove that we spend $500,000 on it, and we're going to save homes and structures that fall into that category, that's when that money could possibly be approved for
By
things.
MWRD.
Correct.
They're the only agency, not anybody
They-
else within the state or
They help
county.
streamline things. The Army Corps of
Okay.
Engineers involved
Yes?
because they're the experts on overland and channelized stormwater flow. Everything that we do regarding the creek or the river, Army Corps of Engineers has a stake in the game of making sure it's done right.
That's correct.
So
I know
when
there's several
we talk about going
agencies.
through the backyards though, and even on the other side, the north side of the bridge from you, where the silt
Yeah.
is built up,
Yep.
in my projection, nothing's going to happen over there unless we have a large-scale project. The river still flows through, or the creek, excuse me, still flows through there.
But the meandering was changed.
it's a large opening, that's the other thing. It's larger than it needed to be,
Yeah,
but
I know.
that's our view as non-engineers, as residents who live in town. So,
Okay, that's,
it,
I relinquished.
well,
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know the situation, certainly, don't have the history that you do, Jan, but I don't think it's uncommon for them to, when they go back and rebuild these types of bridges, they typically oversize them. They're not building them for today, they're building them for 20 years from now, 40 years from now. And then the second part of that, and so that's why it's bigger, that also does allow the creek to naturally meander back and forth between one side of the culvert, the other side of the culvert, depending on time, you know, if that's a double divider wall. And then secondly, you know, I think from their perspective, when they're building that bridge, how far do you take your stabilization back in both directions? Typically, they're not gonna go any further than they have to. They'll go to some slope ratio, 4 to 1, 3 to 1, and they'll try to stabilize it beyond that. But, you know, if in the situation that we're talking about, if they went and stabilized with a rock toe or some type of riprap to the end of your property, then what does the guy next door to you say? Well, why did you stop there? Now it's undercutting mine.
No,
So
no,
then
it
they gotta
doesn't
go-
have anything to do with my
Well,
property.
but I mean, where do you draw that line? And so typically, they draw that line within the right-of-way limits. They acquire whatever property that they need for right-of-way to put the bridge in and to put in whatever the apparatus is that they need to stabilize the concrete structure, and that's it. Anything outside of that right-of-way limit remains private property and remains private property responsibility, recognizing that sometimes that structure they put will have an impact upstream, downstream. And then to the question about the sediment or the silt removal, my understanding of the Lower Des Plaines River Watershed Plan does have one of the project that's identified in there is sediment removal. And I think the long story short, it says that there's not enough benefit in the sediment removal for them to do it. So that's the one project that I saw of the 4 project along McDonald Creek that they basically said is pretty much the bottom of the barrel because it doesn't have enough cost-benefit ratio or didn't have
Well, see,
something like that. And so that's the way it's presented currently under the Des Plaines River Watershed Plan. I think what Mark's point is that if we want to do something like that, the first step is to get it recognized as a higher value in the watershed plan, right? And then it would be a larger scale project, not just, you know, maybe not even just Prospect Heights, but, you know, all the way up the McDonald Creek to Wheeling and Arlington Heights and so forth.
Okay, I just want to come back, Mark, to, when we're talking about this letter to go out with the brochure,
yes, sir.
part of our problem, as Jan was talking about, the old committee, we had people staged all the way down the creek, is getting the residents to be not just keeping their area clean, but essentially eyes to see what's going on. My question then comes in, okay, if I have a little bit of a debris blockage, nothing really big, but, you know, sometimes you'll get maybe some, you know, across there, it'll be 6, 8 inches of
A jam.
limbs and whatever that, okay. What is the procedure or the relationship between the homeowner and Public Works as my eyes, I see, okay, here I've got some blockage here. Okay, do I have to tackle that myself, or at what point would we recommend to homeowners, if we're gonna put a letter together, to contact Public Works?
Well, phrasing it to suggest that they do their best to clear their own blockage or the blockage on their property would be paramount, because along the creek, there's all kinds of spots.
Right.
But other than that, for small blockages and things like that, they can contact Public Works. One of my guys or myself will come out, we'll take a look at it and assess what we can do, whether we just bring chainsaws out and put stuff up on the shore for them, you know, to help them keep the area clear.
Yeah,
That
'cause
could be
you know, in other
a
words,
full-time
Right.
job with, the way our creek hasn't been maintained for years.
because you know, I want the relationship between the homeowner and Public Works to work, but not,
Right.
to be a constant, for every nickel and dime.
And we
Right.
appreciate that, because there's only 5 guys for the entire
Right.
city, so you could have 5 guys every day of the week working on the creek, and by the time you got to the end of it, or finally, by the time you got all the way upstream, you'd be starting downstream again. So that is a big part of it. And Commissioner, as you know, every time we have a rain event coming up, or after a rain event, we have a 25 or a 30 location list that I gave you, that we go out and we do creek checks, and we keep them documented in a book. You know, it shows when we get audited by the Army Corps for our levee situation, or different things like that, or our inflow and outflows, that we're doing our job to keep the creek flowing.
Okay, and in regards to that, is there, you think that maybe if we need eyes on the creek, would it help for the areas that you have concern, if we could identify those and maybe try to solicit a homeowner to kind of keep an eye on this? And if you see something, and we'll give them a little parameter, then to call you. So it's a little more of a resident relationship
Yeah.
that works
Right.
for both them and us.
Right. They could contact us, they could contact both the Creek Commission and Public Works, just so you're aware of what's going on also, because you're the body that's trying to help improve the flow. So
Okay?
if you don't know what's going on, you know,
Yeah, I have no
Direct
idea
connection,
what's
you never
going
know
on
what happened.
downstream, right?
so, yeah, I'm a big fan of keeping the creek flowing.
You and me both.
We,
Mark, thanks very much
You're
for
welcome.
your efforts, and
Thank you.
continue the progress.
absolutely.
I'm always available.
And so am I, Commissioner, so
That's
am I.
right.
We do
Okay.
appreciate the
Thank
detailed,
you, thank you
detailed
very much.
response. Thank you.
Okay, so the Community Day booth, who's responding to that?
That is you and
Oh, yeah, you mean this guy,
I.
right here?
Hart's gonna be out of town, it's you and
Oh,
I
so
on June
I-
2nd.
Oh,
And if it's
yeah,
not, if
thanks.
you're not gonna join me,
Thanks
then
a
it'll be
lot.
just me.
You're welcome.
What's going on?
Okay, so what is to happen? Do you know, Rick, is there a time you set up? Is there a
It's
table?
9 to
Is there-
12, we're gonna have a collage of pictures of the creek, which show problems of concern and also places, what we'd like it to look like. We're gonna be there with the brochures that we do have, and pass those out and talk to any residents. And it's from 9 to 12.
Okay. Is there,
I'm here.
does somebody need to know we need a table, or is there anything like that?
No,
No.
we're good.
Okay. You're in charge, thanks. Okay. All right, now, participation in the Prospect Heights Block Party on Saturday, the 23rd. Information table at Lions Park from 2 to 10:30. Is this committee or individuals interested, or is this an open invitation? That block party consists of what area? Lions Park. How much of the creek is that? Do we know?
I don't know what your question is, because Lions Park's right down the street here.
I know that.
But what's that?
So what would our involvement be there, I guess, is my question.
I think basically it would be.
Same thing we're doing-
booth with
Same
the-
as we're doing on the center.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
if we decide to do that.
Do we have to staff it the entire time, or is it a matter of providing materials and intermittently staffing it?
Don't know.
Okay.
I don't have any information on that myself to be able to comment. Do we have any other new items to discuss?
Nope, other
I-
than what we
I've got one, I did attend a meeting, Senator Tammy Duckworth and Congressman Brad Schneider and Jan Schakowsky did put on a grant workshop in, I believe it was in Northbrook on the 14th. So I did attend that meeting. Basically, there were presentations from Army Corps Engineer, FEMA was there, IEMA was there, Cook County Department of Homeland Security, MWRD, Lake County Stormwater Management, SMC, and it basically was a grant workshop for specifically flooding. So a lot of the agencies that we basically would be coordinating with for this project, any creek project that we want assistance from, was there. There was 2 different workshops. There was one workshop for local governments, and then there was one for individual property owners. And so I do have all of those materials from the PowerPoint presentations from all of those presenters from that, and still digesting some of it. But I think there is some value both for the individual property owners, and then there are certainly some value. They talked about the 319 grant program, which we heard from the MWRD speaker a couple of months ago at the last meeting. So a lot of those similar things. And so as I kind of go through all those materials, some of the stuff that's for the individual property owners, I anticipate putting on our webpage, and then some of the other grants is something that I'm sure we'll be talking about at future meetings, and it'll be something that we'd probably ask Mark to work with us on if we were going to pursue some type of grant for that. So
Very good, John, very good. Anything else? Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.